In a story about pirates and marines, there is a weapon that is most common among the strongest, and that is the sword. We have Roger, Rayleigh, Odin, Shanks, Fujitora, and the list goes on. However, there's only two men that were regarded as the strongest swordsmen of their era, and one of them is none other than Dracula Mihawk. Mihawk stands as the embodiment of what Zoro is striving to achieve, and he's the gateway that Zoro needs to pass for his name to reach the heavens. To even stand on the pedestal that Mihawk is on, you must have a kingly ambition with the drive to stand above all. However, despite the very obvious praise the narrative gives him, there are still some naysayers that either misunderstand or outright lie to discredit the Hawkeyes. But before I lay out the obvious truth about Mihawk, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy content like this, and as always, your support is much appreciated. Even at a young age, Mihawk was well renowned before the great age of piracy. This was likely due to seeking out worthy opponents to fight and defeating them, which built his notoriety. At some point, he was even known as the Marine Hunter, which likely also stems from Mihawk's journey to find even stronger opponents to fight. It's currently not stated at what point in his career he got this title, but personally I think this was within the first few years of the great age of piracy. However, the highlight of Mihawk's career is undoubtedly his duels with Shanks. Whether it was only one duel or several, these duels were considered to be legendary, and it remained fresh to Whitebeard even after a decade had passed. It's even stated in the Vivica databook that Mihawk and Shanks competed ruthlessly over their swordsmanship skills. It's never stated who had the most wins, but in the current day, Mihawk showed no interest in settling their duels due to Shanks losing an arm. This implies that either they were even on wins against each other, or they both drew to each other in every single one of their fights. If it was only one duel that they had, then it either ended unresolved or it ended in a draw. It's also implied in Mihawk's Vivicard entry that he joined the Warlords due to Shanks losing his arm. In fact, the direct line states that Mihawk joined the Warlords after losing the presence of strong opponents, which suggests that Shanks was the last worthy opponent he fought and there was none left in the world. This also implies that Mihawk and Shanks were the two strongest swordsmen in the world at the time of their duels, stronger than a 56-year-old Big Mom and a 66-year-old Rayleigh. Sengoku was a legendary marine in the same era as Rayleigh, and they are only 1 year apart in age. If Sengoku being an admiral 14 years ago means that he was still in his prime, then it's possible that Rayleigh was still in his prime when Shanks and Mihawk had their duels. Some may say that Rayleigh had already retired. However, that's only as a pirate. You can't retire from swordsmanship, and we still saw a retired Rayleigh fight Kizaru with a sword, so that argument doesn't make any sense. At the very least, Duels era Mihawk should at the very least be stronger than an old Rayleigh who could temporarily contend against an Admiral Kizaru. Some may question why Mihawk never went to Wano to find strong swordsmen. I mean, it's literally the land of samurai after all, and that's a good question, but it ultimately doesn't really matter. Firstly, Kaido's been in control of Wano for the last 20 years, and the only way to enter the country is by climbing the Koi waterfall, which is extremely risky and can result in shipwreck. Even the world government can't approach Wano due to the geography of the island, so Mihawk in his tiny boat would have little hope. As for why this doesn't really matter at all, is because the Vivicard outright states that there are no more strong opponents left for Mihawk to challenge. So even if Mihawk doesn't personally know the fighters in Wano, it is irrelevant because Shanks was the last worthy opponent left in the world before he lost his arm. This is also why it doesn't really matter if Mihawk sought out for Rayleigh or not, as the whole point of the narrative of their duels is that it was a battle of the two strongest. After Shanks lost his arm 12 years ago, Mihawk lost interest in continuing his rivalry with Shanks, as it's implied by the Vivicard that he is no longer a worthy opponent like he once was. Mihawk is actually the best judge of power we've seen in the story, and it's even stated what Hawkeye sees through is not just one's swordsmanship, but rather the true power of those who stand in his way. Examples of this would be when Mihawk could determine from a glance that Zoro stood no chance against him in Baratie, sensing that Whitebeard was no longer as strong as he once was in Marineford, and he was able to sense the true power of Luffy beyond his combat capabilities. Even though Mihawk seemingly doesn't consider Shanks to be a worthy opponent anymore, it doesn't mean that he's weak in comparison. All it means is that the gap in strength between them currently is just wide enough compared to before that it makes the rivalry pointless in Mihawk's eyes. This makes it understandable why Mihawk looks forward to a swordsman that will surpass his former rival, which he hopes to find in Zoro. In the current story, Mihawk holds the title of the strongest swordsman, which is stated multiple times ever since his introduction in chapter 50. It's further clarified in Mihawk's Vibracard entry that he's the strongest swordsman in the world in both name and reality, so there can be no doubts to the validity of his title. Not only that, it's stated that Mihawk reigns as the world's #1, and the word reign is also used when Garp describes the Yonko's control over the New World. In other words, Mihawk can be viewed as the king of all swordsmen, which is why his position requires one with the disposition to be a king. It's even said by Brandy when unveiling Mihawk's bounty that his sword skills are even greater than Shanks the Emperor. The literal word used to refer to sword skill here is kenwaza, which can also be translated to swordsmanship, sword art, or sword technique. Moves such as Big Mom's Ikoku sovereignty are referred to as kenwaza or a sword technique. Zoro's named moves are all referred to as techniques or sword techniques, and Kaido refers to the Scabbard's moves as sword techniques that bear no resemblance to Oden's. Some may say that the sword techniques are separate and don't involve haki, however we know this isn't true. For example, the Breath of All Things is a sword technique which is rooted in haki that allows a swordsman to cut and not cut what they desire. Coating a sword with armament haki to make the sword tougher also factors into swordsmanship, as it increases the offense and defense of the techniques. This is even emphasized in Zoro's Vibracard entry that the sword technique that was once defeated by Mihawk has been refined beyond comparison to 2 years ago, and we know that's based on Zoro learning haki. We even see Zoro improve his sword techniques yet again in Onigashima by developing the King of Hell sword style due to mastering advanced Conquest haki. It's big 2024 guys. Let's leave these prehistoric Neanderthal haki isn't a part of swordsmanship arguments in the past. It's getting very old and very boring. All that was to say is that Mihawk having the best sword skill or technique is just another way of saying that he has the most powerful sword named attacks, even stronger than anything Zoro has shown, which includes a technique that scarred Kaido, and even stronger than Shanks' Divine Departure, which not only sliced the damned punk, but it defeated both Kid and Killer at the same time. It should go without saying that the strongest swordsman in the world would have the most powerful sword techniques. Mihawk also wields one of the 12 supreme grade blades named Yoru, and is the only black blade of its class. In fact, it's the strongest black blade in the series, even stronger than Shusui, which was wielded by the sword god Ryuma. This is also reiterated in the Road to Laughter booklet, where it states that Yoru is the world's strongest and it harmonizes both hardness and softness. You'll typically see the terms hardness and softness used to describe Mihawk's sword or swordsmanship in supplementary material, such as in the Blue Deep Data book, where it states that Mihawk's slash encompasses both softness and hardness. All it's referring to is how Mihawk can use both a graceful technique, such as when he deflects bullets, or uses a forceful technique like when he slashes the iceberg in Marineford. However, the slash is said to combine the softness element to it as well. This concept isn't highlighted much or is even that relevant, to be honest, but it has been mentioned in the series before, and just knowing it exists is good enough to know in general. The only known trait of a black blade so far is its unparalleled durability, and it was said by Zoro that a black blade wouldn't bend even if it was stepped on by a dinosaur. Yoru is specifically said to have peerless durability in Mihawk's Vibracard entry, which makes sense for the strongest blade. It also says a lot about Mihawk's strength, as the blade needs to be tough enough to channel his full power, the same way Whitebeard's Naginata is credited for being extremely tough due to withstanding Whitebeard's true power. It should also be noted that Whitebeard's blade isn't a sword just because it's a meito. Some people will say this, but meito just means famous or named blade, and weapons such as Kaido's Kanabo are listed to be a meito as well. Some people will try to be slick and try to draw contradictions between Whitebeard and Mihawk's title, but it's just another weak attempt by some naysayers. As for how black blades are formed, we don't really know much about it, aside from it being rooted in haki. It's said by Gyukimaru that Ryuma forged his black blade due to his many battles with the sword, and this is also supported by Ryuma's Vibracard entry as well. It's possible that Mihawk also forged his black blade in a similar manner, but with his own unique twist. As for when Mihawk forged the black blade, this is still unknown. However, personally, and this is only my opinion, I think he forged it as a result of his duels with Shanks. At this point, some of you may be wondering, where do these Mihawk naysayers come from? Unless they're just your typical trolls, Mihawk downplay usually stems from the Marineford War. The first moment comes from Mihawk allegedly admitting inferiority to Whitebeard when that just wasn't the case. All Mihawk was identifying was that Whitebeard was no longer the man he used to be, and the gap in power between Whitebeard and the rest of the world is not what it used to be. As it turns out, Mihawk was right, and it's as I said earlier about Mihawk being the best judge of power in the story. The next moment comes right after this when Jozu blocks Mihawk's slash, and this stems from a misunderstanding of the breadth of all things. We learned all the way back in Alabasta that the best swordsmen can choose what they want and do not want to cut. In fact, Zoro needed to learn this power and understand the breath of iron just to defeat Mr. One. Jozu possesses the diamond fruit, which is much tougher than iron. In fact, it's stated in Jozu's river card entry that he has unparalleled toughness. The slash that Mihawk sent was to Whitebeard, and it wasn't in tune with the breath of diamond. Therefore, Jozu wasn't cut, and he's also strong enough to block it. We even see a similar moment to this when Mr. One defended Luffy and blocked Mihawk's slash. However, once Mihawk focused his sword to the breath of iron, Mr. One was cut down with one slash. You may hear some people claiming that this is Mihawk's strongest slash because of what this foreign marine said, when all he did was a no-name slash with one arm. In reality, the marine is just saying that the slash is coming from the strongest swordsman, so nothing from this Jozu moment is an anti-feat for Mihawk. There's also the short clash with Vista which ended unresolved, and the databook statements refer to this fight as an even fight, or Vista being able to rival Mihawk with his swordsmanship. The problem with this is, funnily enough, there is no problem, as long as the statements are kept in context to the fight in which they are in reference to. It was also very apparent that Mihawk wasn't using his full power in this clash, as he was paying attention to Luffy and had an inner monologue about him. The very fact that Zoro was able to defeat King, who rivals Marco, who is stronger than Vista, is already grounds for this short fight not being an anti-feat. Those are the main moments you'd usually hear in discussions that are worth debunking. There are other moments in Marineford that appear very questionable, at least at first glance, but they are also not anti-feats once you put a second of thought into it. Anyways, with that said, we could talk about potential narratives for Mihawk that may suggest he's a lot stronger than he currently appears to be. When Oda was creating his character Zoro, the reason why he gave him 3 swords was because it was his childish idea of making him even greater than Miyamoto Musashi, who was regarded in Japan as the greatest swordsman of all time. If Oda's thought process for Zoro is to eventually become the greatest swordsman in One Piece, and he has to beat Mihawk to do so, then what does that say about Mihawk? After all, Mihawk is the wielder of the strongest sword in the world, and it's even stated in an official art book called One Piece Rainbow that Mihawk is the only man that can wield Yoru. This statement could just be referring to those that were alive pre-timeskip, as that's when this art book came out in the first place, which in that case, it doesn't really help this case that much. But if it's about anyone in general, then maybe this can help us push this narrative. It might just be the case that for Zoro to be the best, he will need to beat the best, and that would imply Mihawk is even stronger than the likes of Roger, Zebek, and even the sword god Ryuma. Personally, I don't think this potential narrative would even be consistent with the story as it stands, but who knows what Oda is willing to recontextualize or change later in the story. All in all, Mihawk is one of the strongest we've seen in the story, the wielder of the strongest blade, former rival to the Emperor Shanks, and the gatekeeper of ultimate power for Zoro. Currently, Mihawk is back to being a wanted pirate with a whopping 3.59 billion berry bounty on his head, and he has shown no interest in being an emperor. The only thing Mihawk cares about is the emergence of a worthy challenger, hopefully in Zoro, and a quiet, peaceful life. That's all for this topic, so if you enjoyed, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also join the Discord, the link to which will be in the description below. I've been the one and only Zage, and until next time.